Hello, welcome to the Amamansa Network. This is Kamau Mahakoe. This morning, I want us to look at something that I have been observing. I don't know if I'm the only one observing this. I don't know if I'm the only one to whom it stands out or matters, but I've noticed a trend in recent years where the grandmas are insisting that they are going to have life on their terms. They are refusing to do certain things that we have come to expect them to do. They are refusing to play certain roles that we have become accustomed to them playing. For me, it's a very positive sign. It's something I love to see. It's something I'm encouraging the grandmas to continue doing. I watched some videos recently with quite a number of elderly women, right? So grandmas, they're on social media now. They have a presence. No longer can we fool ourselves into thinking that grandma has no access and grandma has no savvy. She may not be as savvy as the younger generation, but she's getting there. She's getting her hands on these devices. She's establishing a social media presence and she's letting her voice be heard. And for some of these grandmas, sadly to say, it's the first time in their lives that their voices are being heard. And a lot of them are saying, we refuse to raise our children's kids. We refuse to be there for you to dump these kids on. Yes, they are our grandbabies. Yes, we love them. Yes, we want them in our lives, but at our discretion, at our choice, at the time that we see fit, when we see fit, right? And if we are going to be a babysitter, we are going to be paid, we are demanding to be compensated. I am all for this. This is something I support. And as a matter of fact, it's a principle that I have always established in my own life. From I was very young, I made the decision that when I became a woman and I started having kids, I would not be one of those women to dump my kids on my mom. That's a decision I made a very long time before I started having kids because I saw so many young girls, young women just do this as a matter of course. They have kids, some wanted, some unwanted, but the kids come. And from my observation growing up, it was the grandmothers really who raised their grandkids while the girl went out and she continued living and she went partying, and because she didn't want this child to dampen her life, to stall her life, and so she decided it was okay to place this burden on her mom. And the moms may be thinking, well, this is just a part of life, and feeling sorry for the young lady and not wanting her life to be derailed, even though the young woman was the one who did not listen to grandma's advice, did not avoid doing certain things, went out and had these kids, and then decide, no, well, I still want to live my life. I still want to go party and I still want to hang out with my friends. I'm going to take the child to mom, or I'm going to leave the child with mom for the majority of the time. This is what I saw growing up. I don't know what the experience was in your neck of the woods, but when I was growing up, this is what I saw. Most of the kids were being raised by their grandparents, specifically by their grandmother. I still see it happening now, but as I said, there is a trend, and it's something I'm promoting, it's something I'm encouraging where the grandmas are saying, listen, I have a life too outside of my grandkids and my kids. I have a life. I have my right to fulfill my desires, my dreams too. I have a right to use my time as I see fit. The other day, I was told there was this lady. She had something to do, right? And she had not even made plans with her mom. She just assumed that her mom was going to be at home so she could dump the kids. And so she woke up and her mom wasn't there. Her mom wasn't around, and the mom didn't tell her where she was going, which she doesn't need to tell her daughter where she's going. And the daughter was all riled up, right up in her feelings and very irate. How dare this woman leave, as if she don't know that she has her grandkids to take care of. And I'm saying, what audacity, what impudence on the part of the daughter to think that this woman, yes, she's an elderly woman, she has the right to live her life, to go where she wants to go without telling you. So it's something I want to drive home to these young women, especially, that when you go out and you have a child, that child is your responsibility. It's not the responsibility of your mother. It is your responsibility, and you need to make sure before the child is conceived that you are able to support that child emotionally, financially, physically. You have to ensure you have these things in place. And if you are not going to be there 24/7 physically, then you need to be in the position to pay someone to babysit or to take the child to a nursery or after school or something. It is not the responsibility of your mom. It is not the responsibility of your mom to raise the child, to discipline the child. Yes, she will pitch in because grandmothers, grandparents do have a role in society, right? Our seniors, they are the storehouse of knowledge and wisdom and experience. And of course, we want to benefit from that. We want them to have an input. But it is not, the responsibility should not lie so heavily on them. They raise the generation and then they must come again and raise another generation. So I don't know what in your village, in your neck of the woods, when you were coming up, I don't know what the state of your grandmas were, but I know when I was coming up, the older women in my community, they were sad women. For the most part, they looked sad. They did not go through life with that verve, that sprite. They looked burdened. They looked haggard. They looked tired. They looked disillusioned, miserable, and they tended to take this out on the grandkids, in whose care, you know, these kids were left in their care. They tended to take out that misery on the kids. So they would beat the kids, they would talk harshly to them, they would say abusive things to them. And it was just a boiling over of the pent up desires that they had that they couldn't fulfill, the fact that they had to stifle themselves because they grew up in a culture that insisted that the male, the dad, his needs came first, his career came first. So the grandmas, when I grew up in the 70s, 80s, so these grandmas were coming from anywhere from the 20s, 30s, 40s, coming up, their birth And so it was ingrained in them that their needs should be secondary, right? Secondary to that of their husbands or to even that of their children. And so a lot of these women didn't have any career to speak of, right? Maybe they had a little skill, maybe they could do some dressmaking, maybe they went to do some days work, 2 or 3 days out of the week, went to wash somebody's clothes or iron for somebody. Maybe they did a little subsistence farming. But these women had no real skill. They didn't have any career. The majority of them didn't have any career. So they were almost completely dependent on their husbands to provide for them. And a lot of these men themselves were barely eking out existence. So he could not give her anything beyond the bare necessity. There was no such thing as going for holidays anywhere. There was no such thing sometimes even as just going out together to enjoy a night out, right? Going on a date, going to a concert. These women pretty much were at home, laboring away, taking care of the children, taking care of the house. It was drudgery, it was boredom, it was tedious, it was unfulfilling. And I'm just remembering the faces now, just looking back at my grandma, the older women in the community. That was their day to day existence, and they were miserable. Yes, there were things that brought them joy. They loved their children, they loved being mothers. These things brought them joy. Yes, I'm not saying it didn't. But in terms of being fulfilled in your life, thinking of as a young girl coming up, the dreams you had, what you want, what you aspired to. Many of them did not achieve any of these things. They were not given the chance. A lot of these marriages, sometimes you hear people talk about, oh, this is my grandma and my grandpa, and they've been married for 50 years, they've been married for 60 years, and they are held up as the epitome of marriage and commitment. Yes, they were married for 50 years, but 50 years of what? 50 years of what? It was not 50 happy years. It was not 50 years of real togetherness and companionship. It was 50 years of sometimes him beating her to a pulp. A lot of times it was 50 years of her suffering abuse after abuse after abuse, with him going outside the marriage, sleeping with all number of women, having illegitimate children or so-called bastard children, whom sometimes she would know about it sometimes, which was even worse because knowing about it and then having to live with it. Sometimes she didn't know, and then when these outside children become adults, they would come and then she's hearing, oh, um, your husband is my father. He was with my mom, and she said 1, 2, 3, 4 illegitimate children coming, 4 different mothers. These are the kinds of things that our grandmas had to deal with. They had to cope with this. They had to find coping mechanisms for these men who went around sowing their wild oats, having totally different families, totally different households in different parts of the community, or further afield, depending on what his line of work was. And it eats away at your soul as a woman. It makes you feel less, it makes you feel just unfulfilled and unhappy. A lot of these marriages that were holding up as grandma and grandpa, 30, 40, 50 years of marriage, they were not happy marriages. Some of them did not even start out, they did not even begin as a happy union. A lot of times they were shotgun marriages where maybe she was, they were fooling around as teenagers. Maybe he was a much older man, as the case is many times. Many times she was a teenager, he was this man in his 20s, 30s, even 40s. Played around with her, got her knocked up, and then her father may have insisted, as it was the tendency to do in those days. He insisted, because of maintaining some false pride, dignity, he insisted that they get married. She may not even have loved him. Now we all know that love can grow. There are cultures, there are several cultures around the world where love is not the basis of marriage, and love comes afterwards. But love will come even if you don't know each other, even if it was an arranged marriage. Once there is respect and you take care of each other and you fulfill each other's needs emotionally, physically, financially, yes, love can come, and it does come. In many cultures, that's how it goes. Love isn't the basis. But when you are forced to marry this man, you as a young girl, forced to marry this man, you may have had a passing fling. You may have thought you were in love with him, but we all know how that goes, right? A teenager in love is fleeting, but you're forced to marry this man. And then on top of that, if he turns around now and he becomes abusive, he becomes your slave driver, he subjects you to all manner of indignities, where you can't walk through the community with your face held high, because everybody knows that he's going from house to house, from frocktail to frocktail, throwing himself, or he's a community dick, having women having kids all over the place for him. She can't walk through the community in peace. When you subject someone to that, and then listen, the years are going to go by. People are going to cope and find ways of going through, and a lot of times she does it for the kids. The time will pass and you will look and see, oh, it's been 10 years, it's been 20 years, it's been 40 years, but it's not 40 years of happiness. Sometimes it's not even 40 years of, you can't even refer to it as a marriage. A lot of times our grandmas and grandpas, they were together, but they were not really together. They lived in the same house, they probably slept in different rooms, they probably slept in different beds. Or even if they're on the same bed, one head turned down, the other head turned the other way. There was no real communication. I've witnessed relationships, right, in households where the woman, even to get a message across to the man, she will not tell him directly to his face. She'll tell the kids, go and tell your father. So go and give your father his dinner. It can get to that point. And yes, the years will roll by. And yes, you'll end up being married for 50 years. But what of it? It's not 50 years of real marriage, right? And the women, as today, they tended to outlive their husbands. And for a lot of them, when the time came, when the husband breathed his last breath, it was a tremendous sigh of relief for her. It was a tremendous sigh of relief. It was a burden lifted from her, because no longer would she have to be walking behind this man, picking up after him, cooking his meals in return for abuse, in return for no show of affection, right? The grandmas of those days, they tended to spoil their sons too, maybe because she felt, as a woman, she felt inferior, and it was drilled into her that the male the needs of the male were first, they were priority, and so she tended to spoil her sons, and she was harder on her daughters. And maybe this is one of the things that we see it today as a what result today is the women are getting ahead of the men. Maybe because they were pushed more, right? And the women are excelling now. The men are falling behind because they were more pampered. Yes, they had to do the male chores, and especially if you lived in the rural areas, you had to go look the firewood, they had to carry water and so on. But still, they were, in my opinion, from what I observed growing up, it was the boys who were more pampered, especially at certain social levels. The boys were more pampered. And in my opinion, it was a negative thing because now we're seeing where the boys can't stand on their own. A lot of them are now depending on women. And the girls are forging ahead. And it is also because the modern young woman is reflecting on how she saw her mom and her grandma growing while she was growing up. She saw, because children pick up these things. Children know that their moms aren't happy, their grandmas aren't happy. They see it on the face. They experience the backlash of that too. They experience the misery. They experience the fact that these women resent their husbands, right? And I think these young women are saying, we don't want to fall into that. We don't want to be in a loveless marriage. We don't want to be in the type of marriage where we are going to be holding up the brunt of it. We're going to be doing the money, the hard labor. And these women are deciding to have, the young women are deciding to have none of it. And the grandmas now also are deciding that that's enough. Enough is enough. And it's something that I love to see. It's something that I think is a positive thing. We are no longer willing to stay for the kids. Because when you stay for the kids are going to pick up on it. They know you're not happy. So it's just as well you don't. It's not wise to stay in a loveless union. It's not wise to stay in a one-sided union. And the modern young woman is not having it, and the modern senior woman is not having it. And we have to remember too, you see, in the old days, when our grandmas and even some of our mothers, those who were stay at home, which most of them were, they stayed at home, they took care of the family. It was much, much harder for them than it is for us now, right? It was much harder for them. They literally, there was no washing machine, or even if there were in some places, for most of the young mothers at that time, they had to hand wash. Some of them had to go to the river and beat the clothes on the rock stone at the river. They literally had to hand wash. So wash day was an entire day. There had to be an entire day out of the week that was wash day. And they had all the pans and all the clothes from everybody's clothes, the kids' clothes, the husband's clothes, right? She had to hand wash and hand rinse and hang out and iron everything. She also, when it came to cooking, it was also a laborious process. There was no blender, and she had to grate the stuff. She had to beat the stuff. She had to crush this. She had to do so. It was very laborious for her. If it's shining the floor, she had to get down on her hands and knees, wipe the floor, wait for that to dry, polish the floor, wait for that to dry, shine the floor on her hands and knees. She had to go look the wood for the fire, catch up the fire in these huge pots, because remember she's cooking for everyone, because more than likely it would be the extended family, right? She had to cook for everyone in these huge pots. It was time consuming. There was no such thing as me time, pampering time, making time for herself. There was no such thing as her getting pedicure, manicure, massage. There was no such thing as that. If it was the clothes for the family, she might end up being the one sewing the clothes, right? So our grandmothers have been through a lot. They literally they have been through the mill. It was drudgery for them. And now, and then no. So when her daughters grew up, for her daughter to come and take the kids and say, no, you, mom, must raise them again. How fair was that? But it's something that happened. I remember too, it is not like you had disposable diapers where she could just take them off. She literally had to wear all the tons of nappies. And a lot of these young women now, they have the kids and brought it to grandma. Grandma had to take care of the babies, wash the nappies all over again. It was just too much. And that's why I think a lot of our grannies looked the way they looked. They really looked haggard. They were unkempt, they were haggard, because it wears away at the body and it wears away at the soul as well. And sometimes I think, sometimes I really do, I look at some senior women and I think to myself, what could your life have been? I'm picturing her as a little girl growing up. Her education was not much. She had to leave school at an elementary level, because she was told your role in life is to go and take care of a man and take care of kids. You as the individual, you don't matter much outside of your kids and your husband. But what were the possibilities? Every mind has limitless potential. Can you think of the contribution that our grandmas could have made if they had been given the chance to develop themselves intellectually, academically, skills wise? Can you imagine how they could have benefited humanity? But their potential remained dormant, it remained latent, and that is why they were so miserable. They were I'm just thinking of the faces. They were miserable. And it's almost to me as if we live in a society in the West here now, for example, where black men consider themselves as being subjugated by white men. And it seems as if each group that is subjugated, they want to transfer that to someone more vulnerable than them. And so black men have a tendency to transfer that to black women. And it would seem like the black women transfer that to their mothers. That responsibility of raising the children, they transfer it to their mothers. And because of the frustration, the anger, the disillusionment, all of that, the grandmas transfer it to the kids. And it's a cycle that I'm seeing it break right now. I'm seeing it break, and I'm all for it breaking. Because these seniors, they are adamant they are adamant that they have paid their dues, they have raised their kids, and they will not raise another generation. It is time now for them. Some of these grandmas are going back to school. I remember years ago, at my school, we actually allowed any age group to come in, right? And there was a point where I was teaching. I had 6-year-olds in the class. I had 60-year-olds in the class, and these were women. All of the seniors who came to my class, they were women. I had women in their 40s, 50s, 60s who were doing mathematics, English language, and human and social biology. And all of these women, they took the classes, they got to the level, they paid for their CSEC exams and did their exams and passed it and went into nursing. And now they are overseas as registered nurses. I can think of 3 of those women in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So a lot of these women are going back to school. They're getting their careers. They're starting their careers in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. They are taking care of their health, taking care of their dental health, taking care of their overall health, learning to eat better. When I go on the field in the mornings to do my laps, a lot of senior women are on the field doing their laps. And it's always more women than men. It's always more women than men. They are going to get their pampering, they're setting aside their me time, they're talking about diet and well-being. And I think this is such a positive thing, right? It's such a positive thing. She has raised her kids, and now it's time for her. And she's saying to her daughters, if you find where you're not going to be able to have your kids 24/7, which we all know is not practical for most persons. Most persons have to work. But if you want me to babysit, then you should pay me the fees to babysit. Isn't that fair? Because a lot of these women, when they take their kids and dump them on the grandmas, they don't think they're obligated to pay the grandma or to give her any kind of financial compensation. They just think it is her duty as the grandma to take care of them. I saw this meme the other day on social media, and it says, I'm tired of taking care of my mom's grandchild. I think my mom needs to come get her grandchild. And it's a legitimate thing that they have. It's a legitimate idea they have, that grandmas are for dumping the kids and going off for the weekend, going off for whenever, because grandma has no life. Well, these grandmas are saying, listen, we do have a life, we do have our dreams, we do have our ambitions, we have paid our dues. When I was growing up, the average grandma had anywhere between 8, 9, 10, up to 13, up to 15 kids. Ask your grandma or your great grandma how many kids she had. And sometimes she lost kids in their infancy, right? My grandma lost 2 kids when they were infants. Her sister also lost 2 kids when they were infants, right? That generation of women were told, you need to have out your lot. It's something they were told, and it's something it was driven into them. You need to have out your lot. So there was no birth control. It was a case where you had intercourse with your husband, and intercourse is the word because you can't even call it lovemaking. A lot of times the experience was just a transactional experience, a physical experience. A lot of times, the whole approach was crude. The whole intercourse was crude. A lot of our grandmas have never experienced orgasm. They don't know what it is. They don't know it exists. They they were told that a woman's job was to please the man. She was there as his helpmate, as his servant, to satisfy his needs. That's what was driven into her head. Her role as his wife is to satisfy his needs. And she was also told that his needs were urgent and he couldn't help himself. And that's why a lot of them tolerated these men going out and getting kids here, there, and everywhere, because he could not control his natural urges, right? And especially if she was there and not doing her job, that every time he wants it, she must be there for it, right? So a lot of these women, every year or every 2 years, they were knocked up again, knocked up, big and ready to drop kid. And there was no time in between that for her. She was either pregnant or lactating. It was a constant cycle of either being pregnant or being lactating. And as you wean that child, another child is in the belly. So, where is the time for her as a human being to even process anything, to process anything? She's raising the kids, she's doing the housework, which, as we said, were laborious because she had to literally be scrubbing them with her hands on her knees, scrubbing the floor on her knees, sewing, doing everything. She literally had to do it manually. There was no instant this or you press a button and bzzz, and dinner is ready. No, dinner took hours, washing took a day, ironing took a lifetime to do. And then she was churning out these kids year after year or every 2 years, 10, 12, 13 kids. At the end of the day, that wears on you. It wears on you physically, it wears on you emotionally, it wears on you mentally. And on top of that, now the indignities that she has to submit to, and the fact that this man pretty much was not holding up his end of the bargain, because okay, she's there tending to the house and the kids, but it's not like he's bringing in anything that is going to make her life any easier. He's just bringing in the mere subsistence, and a lot of times he was drinking out most of it, going to the rum bar, spending most of the time at the rum bar, or giving it to other women. And she had to be finding ways to make ends meet on top of it. So a lot of times she had to be holding up his end of the bargain in addition to her huge end of the bargain. It wears on you, it tires you out. And a lot of these grandmas, their only solace was to go to church. Their only solace was thinking of a life after. The life that's going to come after this one. That was their only solace. So a lot of times when I was growing up, you'd see grandma going up to church, not with not with her husband. He was at the rum bar, or he was playing dominoes, or he was at the horse racing shop betting on horses, or he was off playing cricket or something. She was going to church. She was um trying to find some space in this hereafter, because this life here was drudgery for her. So religion was her only hope. She got to the point where that was her only consolation, you know, to think that when she died, she would go off to somewhere else where she didn't have to deal with all of this, right? But the modern grandma is insisting that in this life, in this here and now, she wants to live. She wants to live life. She wants to travel. She wants to celebrate her special days. She wants to see what she can do for herself because she plans to be here for a while. She plans to be here for a while, right? And she's taking care of herself. She wants to see her kids and her grandkids come to their fullness, and she too wants to come to her fullness. It's something that is very reassuring for me. It's something that I'm happy about it. When my mom resisted the title. When my mom resisted the title of grandma, she didn't resist being the grandma. She loves that, right? She loves her grandkids, but she resisted the title. She didn't want to be called grandma because for her it meant she was getting old. My mom, she was a very young mother. She had me when she was 17, and she was a young grandma as well, right? But she didn't want to be called grandma. But she loves her grandkids. And like I said, I made that decision long ago. I would never take my kids and let them become a burden to my mom. That's something I would never do. I've seen it happen with other persons in my family. With my grandma, I've seen it happen where she raised a number of her grandkids, right? I would say to some extent she even raised me. Because my mom was pretty, like I said, my mom was 17 when she had me. My grandmother took care of us. My grandmother, I think she had a very miserable life. There were things that brought her joy, yes. There were things that brought her joy, but I think all in all, she had a miserable life. And a lot of it came from the fact that she had to be taking care of everybody else. Everybody's needs were put ahead of hers. If she made dinner, she shared everybody's before her. And this is how she was raised to believe that her needs were secondary and everybody else's needs were primary. And sometimes she would share herself out. There would be no dinner left for her. It would be what we call the bun, what's left in the bottom of the pot. She would scrape that and she would sit and eat that. My grandmother had to deal with adults coming to her to tell her, oh, your husband is my father, several times. My grandmother had to deal with that. And in her generation of women, a lot of them had to deal with things like that. You had to live in a community where you knew and everybody knew that your husband was here, there, chasing skirt tail. She had to deal with that. And it I think it wore on her. I could see that she was not a happy woman. She was married for many, many, many years. But living in that household, my grandmother and her husband rarely spoke to each other. There was bitterness between them. They were still married. When my grandfather died, he was a married man, but his wife was not a happy woman. She didn't talk to him. They didn't sleep in the same room. And even when they slept in the same room, they probably were on different beds. or if they were on the same bed, they turned their backs to each other. Right? To me, that's no way to live a life. That's no way for anyone to live. And I'm happy that the senior women are putting their feet down and saying, I am not going to live like that. I want to be happy. I have a friend now, she's 76. I call her my friend. And sometimes I refer to her like if I see her, I say, hey young girl. And I guess some seniors would take offense to that, but I know she doesn't, right? I call her young girl because she behaves like her. Her frame of mind is her body may not be keeping up with it, but she has a young mind, right? So she's 76, and her partner now is 50 years old, and she knows that there are persons who are looking on and criticizing, but to her, it's okay. That's fine. She knows what she wants, and she has whatever in whatever conversation she has had with her partner, they have come to the agreement. This is what they both want. For whatever benefits they get, it is not for any of us to decide whether that is right or wrong. It's for her and her partner to decide. So there's a 26-year gap. We are more familiar with and more ready to accept if the reverse was true, that the man is 26 years older than the woman. We're more ready to accept that. But you see, these seniors, no, they are deciding what is right for them, what they want. They're no longer conforming to what society says they must do, they must have, they must settle for, they must condone. No. So for me, it's a good thing, and I'm encouraging all the grandmas out there, don't allow yourself to be abused. Don't allow your grown ass kids to come and dump their kids on you and insist that you raise this new generation. It is their responsibility to raise their kids. And if they're going to ask you to babysit, they should compensate you for your time. You now, as an elderly woman, you need to see the world. You need to see what you haven't seen before. You need to see what's out there. You need to have pleasant experiences, because I know for a lot of you, your marriage was not a pleasant thing. A lot of our grandmas suffered even before marriage. A lot of our grandmas were abused in their own families by their fathers, their grandfathers, their uncles. They were sexually abused, physically abused. A lot of their suffering started from very early. And a lot of the insecurities and inferiority complexes started right there in their homes, where they were seen as second-class citizens in their homes, there to satisfy everybody else's needs. And they went into marriage with this mindset, and so they condoned all kinds of abuses. It's time we put a stop to it, and I'm really glad that these senior women are demanding better for themselves. They're demanding better. I'm all for it. So let me know how you feel about it. Let me know if you're a senior woman, what has your experience been, and how do you feel now about life and the prospects being here on the planet at this time. Let me know your thoughts. Until next week, when we talk about some other important and interesting topic. This is Kamau. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful week.